thank you for taking the time today to join us on this webinar, sponsored by DALIM Software. My name is Graham Blanks, and I'm the Director of Business Operations for DALIM Software here in North America. Today's webinar is titled DAM by Brand, which multi-channel marketing strategies deliver exceptional customer experiences. We have put together a great panel of industry professionals with decades of experience in the world of DAM. They will be sharing some of their thoughts and insights around today's topic. Let me first introduce the panelists, and each one of them will have a presentation and share a little bit more of their background and their bio. First, we have my colleague Frederic Sanuy, who is the Director of Marketing and Partner Programs, Enterprise Solutions at DALIM Software.
Good morning.
We're also joined by Florance, DAM Practice Manager at RiseTime, and Bulent Dogan, Senior Solution Architect at Cyangate. But obviously you'll hear a little bit more about the background as part of their presentations. You will also see on the GoToWebinar panel that we have a questions panel open. Please submit any questions that you may have for either one of the panelists, and as we progress through today's content, and then we'll try and answer as many of those questions after the presentations. And first up is Frederic Sanuy. So over to you, Frederic.
Yes, thank you, Graham, and good morning, everybody. So nice to get you, everybody, here in this webinar. So I will start by myself. So as Graham was saying, I'm taking care about director as a technical director of marketing by DALIM Software. And in fact, if you are looking at my bio, more or less, I spent a lot of time working between different agencies in France. At the top of these agencies to leverage DAM. So first thing is all about finally what brands and retailers have to face today. So the world has definitely changed. It's not only about simple graphic files, it's even more. So different types of new formats. It's all about very large graphic file format. It's all about video, 3D, and of course, one of the challenge is you have to provide the same content in different types of the channels. So it's whatever it's the mobile, it's the web, and the social. And of course, this is what we are calling this new wave 4.0 that's starting 1 century ago. And so this is just the beginning of a revolution. I'd like, first of all, to highlight some interesting numbers coming from PwC, which is a consulting company. And so what we are showing is something I think you get this experience every day, and especially as soon as you are working by a large organization. When we are talking about digital transformation, in fact, at the end of the day, we see so many people struggling every day just sharing content between different stakeholders of the organization. And regarding the forecast for the next 5 years, we can see that we have so much more things to do to improve, to share this content. And also regarding some other analytics from Gartner last year, when we see that so many people, too much people are using some third-party cloud public things, okay? Of course, to be successful by brands, it's also a matter of a team, and especially, as you know, for DAM, you have to get something like a DAM manager in order to motivate the team, in order to organize the content, in order to lead the team. And if you are I'm just taking the example of the just published last month, the Internet Trends of Things, just to see finally what brands are waiting for. And you can see that, of course, one of the main things, and this is what we are doing every day on each of you, mainly we are working with mobile. So for any vendors today, they have to provide a solution in a way that you can use and manage your content just on your mobile. The other trend is also about video, and you can see whatever the analytics, the usage of video is just incredible, and most of the marketing today is driven by video. And of course, the last but not the least is all the e-commerce things, and we can see that it's growing and growing, and we see more and more now vendors and also retailers and brands working all together to facilitate to share all their content on the eShop platforms. Among some of the new things people have to be able to manage in the system is all about 3D, RR, etc. And so we just see that today it's everything in your pocket. So and in order to improve the customer experience, to get some new amazing and immersive experience, you have to be able to manage such 3D objects in your hand just using the capability of the augmented reality. The other thing also important to be able to tackle is also KPIs, because at the end of the day, most of brands, what they need, of course they need a solution, but they need also to be able to measure the performance. And KPI is really the one thing, it's not only one more thing, this is crucial for all strategy, digital strategy. Okay, so this is what I'm calling break down the silos. So at the end of the day, we have to ask a question if a DAM solution can be really the key point to be successful for an amazing experience. Of course, when we are talking about DAM, we are talking about some different type of things. We have digital asset management, we have media asset management, which is something a little bit different from the DAM. We have also production asset management, and we see also a couple of vendors. They think they are the DAM, but in fact they are more. They have more a PAM, and also some brand asset management. That's something, this type of keywords that you can find today in the market. So of course, as usual, as you know, everybody of you, and since perhaps the last 20 years, the DAM is a clear representative of truth of your assets. This is, of course, the first point in order to organize the content in your by your organization. So the needs for DAM is coming from different types of vertical markets, coming from publishers, coming from the marketing, also packaging, which is also more and more involved and needs the DAM to manage different versions. And so all that markets, they need, at the end of the day, they need the DAM to manage brand consistency. They need also to get some work in progress, because most of the people, what they need to work all together, and they need to map a business process mapping. So they need some automation, and of course at the top to get some digital rights management. So of course, for how DAM finally, how can use the DAM to be as a leadership for by brands and retailers. And the first thing is also about the maturity, but I think that's something which is progressing now today after years. But we need to know your, of course, your product, and that's also very important to know by brands. You need to manage your content. You need to own your own metadata. You need to be able to do that homework, which is so crucial to be successful. So as a unique selling point for DAM, it's, of course, today we are more and more talking also about the experience, because the world now of the Internet of Things is using Facebook every day. So we cannot imagine to get something more complex than any Facebook. So it's important, of course, to, and as the 10 core DAM characteristic is explained since a couple of years, to manage metadata, to manage different types of features, distribution, ingest, secure, very important. This is the key features for DAM. And when we are talking about experience, that's also something we have to work on our side, and especially on DALIM side, to improve the user experience. So it can be something like that, or it can be something like that, because you need to be able to organize quickly your assets and to control your assets. And sometimes you need to propose a different type of experience, something very easy to use. You don't need to get days of training by brands to be successful. And one of the key of the features, that's something we can propose, is to be able to control your asset, to zoom, to get the right color, to be able to mark up your file. This is the first step of your workflow. And of course, you need to be able to provide analytics and all that features. This is more than a package. This is the benefits of DAM for the marketing strategy in order to improve the brand awareness. Of course, one of the challenges by brands today is also how I can manage my DAM solution on-premise, in the cloud, on hybrid, and you can see during the last year the evolution And it's not only to, as you can see on the right, to only host a web application or CMS, it's also for application themselves. So this is more or less the landscape today between on-premise, service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. And at the end of the day, your DAM solution has to be at the heart of the digital hub in order to manage all the brand marketing cocktail, as you can see here in this nice infographic from the Historic Group. So our goal, our target on our side is to improve the user experience in order to change all brands and retailers' KPIs. So you need to provide personalization, you need to get DAM as an engine, you need to break down the silo through an amazing UI and UX experience. So this is what's working on our side, and we try to achieve that goal every day when enterprise DAM meets enterprise workflow between cloud, security, UI, personalization, performance. So now we get a poll just to give you some, we would like to get some feedback from your experience on your site. So just before moving to John, we'll get poll starting just now.
So basically, we posted a quick poll to the attendees just to get some feedback in terms of who's using what, where, and when. And then once we get that feedback, we'll hand back to Frederic, who will hand it off to you, John. So the feedback looks like 25% are using the same basic tools, email, spreadsheets. About 20% of the audience said they're using free solutions like Dropbox, Drive, and WeTransfer. 90%, which is a good portion, are using DAM solutions and project management. 20% are showing custom integrated development, and 5% don't know. So that's the results of the poll, and back to you.
My name is John Florance. I'm from RiseTime, and I apologize, I forgot to do my background slide, but basically I have about 20 plus years in publishing and publishing technology. And as of this month, I just realized I have been in digital asset management for a full 10 years. At RiseTime, I'm the DAM practice manager, where I help people with different workflows, governance, change management, adoption, metadata design, things like that. And RiseTime's primary business model is hosting enterprise DAMs, content management systems in public clouds. So I wanted to bring two basic points to your attention that I deal with quite a bit, because I deal with a lot of enterprise marketing teams who manage brand portfolios rather than single brands. And these are some of the challenges that we've had. And the first ones I want to point out are the agencies. Most large corporations, CPG, pharma, large brand organizations deal with outside agencies for creative work, and that brings some good and some bad. On the potential challenges side, there's a nature of work for hire. So while the company or the marketing organization may own the brand, the agency actually does the work. And so if you're talking about work in progress, traditional DAM workflow type items, those are a little trickier because the agency's compensation is tied to delivery of the asset, not participation in the workflow on your system. So that's a challenge. People change agencies all the time, and that concept of a divorce, I threw that in there, where you have to move assets from one agency to another, is messy and can be pretty expensive. Also, agency people, after a year or two, they tend to become your subject matter experts on your own content. So when you do change brands, there's that potential that the most knowledgeable people about your content go with that contract. And then lastly, agencies tend to be focused more on projects and campaigns and not on brand management. So you still have to mediate the brand's activity with your own activity around brand effectiveness and marketing effectiveness. The good news, though, is that most agency people are big DAM supporters. They like the fact that there's a common vocabulary, that they can go to one system and rely on that system being consistent over time. And what we have found is that agency personnel tend to make good communities of practice. They tend to be engaged, engaging, question things, accepting. So they're a very positive set of users where sometimes the in-house people are not so much. And if you go to the next slide. And on the brand side, there are also some good and some bad. DAM, as you can imagine, brand members are primarily focused on setting strategy and having agency people actually execute on that strategy. So some of the problems there are when you're talking about assets, content within your system, most brand people in-house don't even know what Adobe CC is or have no experience in that field. So they become more curators of this content than subject matter experts. A lot of big corporations that have broad portfolios, as a best practice, rotate team members between brands. So while someone may have a year or two expertise in, say, brand A, you may come to find out at the first of the year that they've moved on to another brand, taking all that institutional knowledge with them about brand A. So that can be a problem. And then metadata in general, a lot of brand people believe this is not their responsibility, and it scares them a little bit. Even though they love to find their assets through search and love things like faceting and who did what last, they aren't really into entering metadata or managing metadata per se. The good news is that if you design your enterprise DAM correctly, that the brand people learn to trust it, and they know that whatever activity they need to monitor, they can always go back to that single source of the truth. Also, from the technology side, is when a DAM is successfully launched, they start to understand that instead of looking for repository solutions for each individual channel or initiative, like social, packaging, traditional marketing, newspaper flyers, they know that the default is to go back to the DAM and use a DAM as a single source of the truth, which simplifies their implementation plans when they're looking to roll out new channels, for example. And then it also gives that marketing person the opportunity to develop these communities of practice, both internally and with their brand partners, their agency partners. And that becomes easier because now instead of having to learn each agency's lingo and protocols for working with digital assets and channels, you now have a common set of vocabulary within the asset management system that normalizes those conversations and makes it better communication and easier transitions if for whatever reason you decide you want to move from one agency to the other. So that's all I had. I wanted to talk about those organizational pluses and minuses with managing large brands through a DAM. Now I'd like to turn it over to Bulent Dogan from Sandgate.
Hi everyone. My name is Bulent Dogan. I'm a solution architect at Sandgate. I was introduced to digital asset management when I started working at Artesia, which was one of the initial digital asset management lenders back in the day. That was year 2000. And then in 2007, I formed Sandgate, and we have been since then helping many large corporations implement digital asset management systems, and we turn and become partners with these companies to go along the DAM journey with them. So what I would like to talk about is how do we see DAM in the future? Where do we see DAM if we think about technology, if we think about what is going on in the industry, various industries, even automotive industry even is a good example. What we want to see, and this has been mentioned in many of the Henry Stewart events, is that we want fully automated systems where people don't even need to put metadata in. The system should be self-managing and predictive. So that boils down to you upload an asset into the system, it automatically puts all the metadata that's relevant to that asset, and then if you want to search, you don't even need to search. When you log into the system, the first thing you see is the asset that the system predicted that you will like and would be leveraging. Or some of the automations will be to assign that asset to you to work on. So in reality, we're not there. Obviously, this is like the Tesla coming up with an autonomous vehicle, but it's not really there yet. So we need metadata, and we still have the burden of typing in this metadata, making sure it's correct, making all our assets organized in the right way with governance around it. We need librarians, administrators, and many other people to contribute to this effort, and we have a lot of manual processes around this. So what can get us to that feature is in your digital ecosystem, you can actually see that integrations can slowly move you towards that utopic DAM system. So when you are uploading an asset into the digital asset management system, you want to capture the metadata at the source of when that metadata is created. So this can be, for example, product information. So the product information should not ideally initiate in the DAM, but instead it should be coming from your product information management system or master data management systems. So if we can tie digital asset management systems into these product information management systems, as an example, we can pull all of these information into the asset, and this can suddenly make your asset very enriched. And we can then push that content out to different distribution platforms like e-commerce, CMS systems, or product experience management systems, various systems with no effort, because all of the product data will already be going through quality control. The organization is established up front. You do not need to essentially put together a lot of effort to make that asset rich enough to be distributed. But then you may question and say, how about our lifestyle images? Then we started seeing that we have media enrichment by using computer vision or artificial intelligence. So that is now slowly helping to bring up these keywords. So you can actually see, I want to see people smiling while they are holding my product. And you can actually start searching on those type of concepts, because the content is being processed by the computers to give you that type of keyword. There are additional, I just talked about products, but there are many other areas where you can actually focus on to get additional information. For example, if you have a photo studio, your photo studio management application, you might be working with Capture One or other things, but they can actually capture a lot of data up front. It can capture the talent, the product, even the barcodes, the location of the shoot. All of that can travel into the digital asset management system. And then you might have a contract lifecycle management system that manages the contracts that you have signed with those photographers, with those talents, with those venues. And they can also flow into the digital asset management system. We are seeing more of these integrations nowadays that are enabling us to fully automate that process, where when the contract expires, the asset suddenly disappears and it gets pulled from your e-commerce site or from your CMS, or it gets notified to be pulled out from those systems. So integration is going to take us slowly towards that feature. There are many other tools out there, depending on your industry, depending on your line of business, that can be integrated into to enrich your assets. But these are some of the samples I just came up with. There are many more. However, if we want to conclude out of this, if we go to the next slide, there are certain challenges. We can distribute our content and we can create great brand experiences by using these integrations. And integrations suddenly become our trend. We can take a piece of content and display on our web content management system without anyone touching their hand on that content. Once it's created, it suddenly shows up on the web content management system. But then to get to that sophistication, to get to that automation, there are certain downsides nowadays, which is the cost of integration and the constraining effect of integration. Everybody who has experience through an upgrade with the DAM system suddenly starts seeing that, or maybe a change in the PIM system essentially breaks the integration with the DAM system. So there are lots of issues that might be happening when you start integrating. So good architecture, good planning, and working with partners and working with systems that can actually work within your own ecosystem with the tools that you use, with the distribution partners that you use, can be the solution for you. You need to make sure that you tackle your problems one at a time. You don't push yourself to push all of these automations and solutions at once, and try to go and deliver the best experience by providing small improvements to your digital asset management system or to your ecosystem, and then that will slowly turn into great, exceptional brand experiences. So I went a little bit quick, but in terms of integrations and how they can be used to deliver brand experience, this is all I have, but I'm open to all your questions.
Thank you, Bulent. I had a quick question. I mean, obviously, all of you have had many years in the digital asset management world. One of the slides that I think that Frederic posted on his presentation was this division between, I would say, 4 different sort of silos of digital asset management. And obviously, we've had this digital transformation over the past 10 years, and we're seeing a huge growth in the amount of content that brands and retailers need to produce to obviously sell their products. Are you seeing a trend for people looking to have one system fit all of those scenarios, like work in progress, production asset management, media asset management, digital asset management, and then brand asset management? Or are you seeing people say, well, let's tackle each of the silos one at a time and see how we can better integrate best of breed solutions in those specific areas? I mean, I guess that'd be a question for you first, Bulent, and then maybe John could throw in some of his comments.
Sure. I see both trends at the same time. What I see is that a lot of large corporations try to put together everything in one central location, which is great, central repository. When it comes to final assets, this works pretty well. But then when it comes to work in progress, sometimes the sophisticated systems with many integrations, it makes it harder for the creative people to essentially work with that content. Obviously, it depends on the system that was chosen, what that system was tailored towards. There are many systems out there that favor a publisher versus a marketer versus videographers. So those 4 different silos of applications that we have seen are now there's a pushback on certain areas, especially on the creative side, to say, can I do my photo management on one side of the application, another application that I love, then push my finals into the enterprise DAM. And a videographer may say, can I work in, I don't know, maybe CAT TV or IPV, those type of systems, and then just publish my final content into the DAM instead of trying to user map. So I see both trends, but it's just based on how people's needs are and how their history have been, what their pain points have been in the past.
Do you see a difference in the length of time of the deployment versus a failure rate for a deployment if it goes too long?
Definitely. If anybody wants to deliver something at one shot, I have seen. I mean, I always say my career has been 50% failures because I worked by directions from the customers. I want it this way. I warned the customers that the big bang approach of releasing a solution that can do everything, I haven't seen it succeed and succeed to the level it should succeed at least. So the longer the deployment process is, it's more likely to fail because your requirements change during the time that you're deploying and creating a larger system with many integrations.
Thank you, Bulent. John, any thoughts on the same subject?
Yes, I actually, just to back up what Bulent said, actually worked at a place that they had a big ERP project that was going to unify the universe, and they called it Big Bang, and everyone connected with that lost their job. So I never, anytime someone says a project's called Big Bang, I tend to run. But I agree with everything Bulent said about, having the appropriate tools and then these large enterprise dams. I think the thing that is different now than even 5 years ago is I've kind of observed that if you're a large CPG, more than 10 brands and in the billions in revenue, you might have specialized tools and platforms like for packaging, video production, social. But I think the difference is today that there's an expectation from the organization that even if you're working locally or you're working externally as a partner, you're still working within the context of the dam and the information architecture, so to speak, of the organization. So that if you're creating packaging for something that's going to go to a grocery store, that it'll tie back to your PIM, and it'll tie back directly or indirectly to your supply chain, and it'll also tie back to your social channels, so that you don't end up having people sitting in between these silos, translating or transcribing between them. That all that is in the original design and the deployment, and that, as Bulent pointed out, that's what we all spend a lot of our time doing, is making sure that before we even start working, that we've thought that through and kind of future-proof that information architecture.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions from the audience. Excuse me. This question is for you, John. It's to go back and talk about the metadata subject. So we have a question from the audience. Other than the fact that we all agree in the precise and accurate metadata really brings value to an organization. And you'd mentioned the fact that one of the challenges today is, it always has been, that getting people to put in that metadata. Have you seen any things or methods or training programs that have helped people get over their fear or their resistance to entering metadata on assets?
Yes, in fact, I just got bit by my own advice to someone the other day. We spend a lot of time designing these really complex metadata schemas to describe all these different assets. And then on the flip side, we do things like design templates or integrations to help minimize the amount of clicks that a a user would have to go through to get that data entered. And like if the information exists in a PIM and they're uploading a product asset, they should not have to retype more than 1 or 2 terms to retrieve that information and have it populated or available within the DAM. And I always justify it by saying users should not be forced to do more than 3 or 4 clicks. And I was on a call with one of my customers a couple weeks ago, and they actually called out something and said, that's more than 4 clicks. So people actually do listen to that. But I think it is compelling because when you have 2,000 or 3,000 users in your system, the difference between 4 clicks and 10 clicks does translate into not just productivity, but it's, it also starts to erode people's buy-in because they're there to get the job done with the assets that you supplied to them, not necessarily become librarians, so to speak.
Yeah, are you seeing people becoming increasingly more complacent with the fact that more and more systems are implementing artificial intelligence and deep learning?
I think that the expectation is there that these things are going to come in and not necessarily save the day, but they're going to have significant impacts. I would maybe use the analogy of 10 years ago when I got in this, everyone argued, why would I build a DAM and all these metadata models when I could use something like a Google search appliance or some search technology to just, index, random files. And my argument was always, well, your business is organized to begin with. You have finance, HR, supply chain, you have all these structured components to make sure your customers get what they want. To then throw that out and use a tool that is meant to index the internet is kind of contrary to those kind of efforts. So I think people now are hopeful that these will pay off for them. My feeling is that they're either going to fit specific niches, or if you're a situation like an old corporation, an old brand that has tens of thousands or millions of assets, these AI tools are definitely going to become big time savers and great tools. We see actually these tools, I think we see these tools paying off in media and entertainment first before they get to marketing, but I think they're making their way into marketing.
Yeah. And Bulent, what are your thoughts on this whole challenge around, getting people to get over their fear or their resistance to entering metadata on assets?
Yeah, as I mentioned, my whole focus was integrations in this webinar. So the less they put in, the better it is, obviously, just because they are always resistant. And what we should try to accomplish is that they should feel like they are putting minimal data, but we should be able to see that they have already entered that data somewhere else, or somebody else has entered that data. We should be able to go and pull that from the source of when it was initially entered and quality has been improved at that time. So making people do the things over and over, or forcing them to enter product information, for example, again, write the product information somewhere else, or write information, read through a full contract, and then understand and put together that information in. Those type of things are burden, and they are the things that actually make the DAM systems eventually get put aside, and people don't use it, or you need a lot of people governing that system, constantly policing people to say, you didn't put your metadata in, you didn't do that. So I'm hoping that integrations and those type of pooling data where there is already data available will help. AI is not there yet, but it can help in little ways. It can actually help in terms of identifying products maybe automatically from images, or identifying different colors, so that you don't have to retype the colors available in the system, or identifying if there's person in that or not. So it does help, but not as significant as we want it right now. It's not as accurate, it's not as predictable right now.
So that leads into the next question we got from the audience, and this is for you, Bulent. When you talked about Capture One, are you talking about embedded metadata that photographers add SKU model information contracts that can flow into the system?
It can be one of them. There are other tools out there that work with Capture One and can actually track all aspects of a photo shoot. These are photo studio management systems. So those type of systems can track many aspects of the photo shoot, and then embed that information either at the time of photo, when the photography is created, or tie it back to that data to identifiers so that when it comes into the dam, we will be able to go reach out into that more sophisticated photo studio management systems and pull that information in. So two approaches can work, but the extended metadata inside images might be a little challenging, especially there are various different types like raw files, and then you may have JPEGs and TIFFs and various things coming into the picture. It gets more challenging. A more sophisticated solution usually can handle these types of things.
Yeah.
Without
So integration,
everything into it.
Yeah. So integration with other systems that contain the metadata already is high value, basically, those sorts of scenarios.
Right.
So we have another question from the panel. For the panel, and this will be for all three of you. How would the panel assess the metadata currently available and its value in terms of search and discovery? And will access to precise and accurate in-frame metadata increase value of digital assets in search and discovery? So who would like to start that one off? Fred?
That was a little complicated.
Yeah. The only thing.
So let me read it again. So how would the panel assess the metadata currently available and its value in terms of search and discovery? And will access to precise and accurate in-frame metadata increase the value of digital assets in search and recovery? I think it's all really about what is the real inherent value of that metadata. I mean, people have talked about the fact that sometimes the metadata is more important than the actual asset itself.
I think at the end of the day, it's very crucial for any brand because I spend so many time in agencies where people are just searching for the assets or have to reshoot a couple of products or whatever solution. At the end of the day, of course, we say that it's so important to get some work in progress, but the content, I'm okay for that. It's important to get the right content, but without any schema of metadata, it's just a waste of time. So, and it's important also for vendors to be able to figure out this challenge in order to, because it doesn't to be something very complex to use or even the search. And sometimes a couple of vendors have to learn from the free cloud things from Google to the Google of the world or to a Facebook. So yes, I do agree with this statement. It's so important to be successful.
I'll go. I'll contradict Fred a little bit. I'm kind of old school, and because we're talking about brands, I still believe that the value of these assets is in telling a story, in the sense that it's not just about information. It's really about the emotional connection that these stories have with consumers or the end user. So in that context, to me, the metadata is extremely valuable because it provides context, because once you tell that story, if you put it in your digital asset management system and you're not able to leverage it, then it becomes of no value. But I still believe that the content, for the most part, is always the high value part of the asset, with the metadata really being a close second. Without the metadata, I would totally agree that these files are just files.
And I want to add one more thing. I agree on that metadata is very important. Obviously, not as important as content, because we're trying to manage the content by leveraging metadata. But at the same time, there is a good distinction we need to make in every implementation. Every field that we are asking the users to put in, or we are pulling into our digital asset management system, needs to be scrutinized. Where will this be used? Is it really needed? Does that enhance the customer experience, the user experience? We need to look into these details, because I have seen where people were asked to put the size of a product. Maybe it's 50 milliliter box versus a bottle versus a 100 milliliter bottle. It's not really that important in the DAM potentially to differentiate those, but it can be more useful in the master data management or for manufacturing purposes, or how many in a box come in this for this product. That's really not the place for that piece of content and that piece of information to live in the DAM. That piece of information might be used in other systems like product information management system, but to scrutinize every field and understand that, is this going to add burden to my users? Is this going to ever be used? And go over and your existing metadata schemas and understand how much value are you getting out of every field. Is it being populated? Is it being searched on? That is really important. So the importance of metadata is there, but not everything should be considered, or the more the merrier is not applicable in this case.
Okay. So we have another question from the audience, this time related to rights or rights management. So rights would seem to be critical for the proper distribution in a multi-channel campaign. How mature are rights applications and integrations today, and where do you see this headed in the near future? Perhaps we could start with John.
You know, interestingly enough, I was in the previous question about metadata. I was going to almost say that I think people make metadata out to be harder than it really is in practice. It just, metadata should be more of a practical endeavor. But on the flip side, I think rights is really hard. And maybe that is just my experience with it, but I think with, you know, rights is kind of an umbrella term that covers so many different aspects of permissions. You know, it conveys ownership, channels, talent payments. You know, now we have GDPR coming in through Europe. There's a lot of complexity in there. So I think that in retrospect, if I even went back 2 or 3 years, I would probably have spent more time on rights than I did, and less time on metadata, like say control vocabularies, things like that. Because I think rights, if metadata is a love note to the future, so to speak, I can't remember who coined that term. I think that rights are just the opposite. Without really getting that nailed down early, you know, just it's tough to recover from that. So I'm not sure if that answered that question.
Yes, I do agree with John. It's I'm on the same position. Even if on my side, 18 years ago, I started at the head of a photography agency, and I can tell you, as you were saying, it's years ago. I think we should have spent more time on the right, because a couple of agencies, especially in Europe, were just were getting into trouble, not able to manage rights management. So, and of course, the law has changed, and so many things are changing now, as you were saying. So, but I think now customers and especially brands have some nice piece of technology that to manage that. So it's today it's definitely nice to have to get at the top of your organization of assets.
So I will approach this again with integration, obviously.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing now is that there is new technology coming out. We have new vendors out there doing rights management, and this has been the missing piece. In most cases, we handled it with metadata so far. We tried to create complex metadata fields to capture that information, which really did not boil down to the right representation of those contracts and what the rights, how we want to check the rights. But it kind of worked. And we simplified it to say that, okay, you have the full rights, you need to check with someone or you can't use it. So I have seen where the scale of rights turned into those 3 simple questions, and that can your drop-down list in your DAM. So if we start thinking about the contracts and how agencies work, we are now telling people that I don't rely my agencies to track my content. I want to track it myself, because when they leave, they charge me a ton. But we leave the contracts out of the question. We leave the rights out of the question. We need to also start thinking about when my agency is signing a contract to purchase content on behalf of me, then that is my money they are spending. I need to have governance around it. So I need to be able to put my own contract lifecycle management system in place potentially, and have my agencies get approvals to use it, to purchase it, and maybe centralize that process where that information can then be integrated into the DAM, so that the contract details are immediately assigned to the asset, and that bridge is closed, and the complexity of entering rights and checking rights and clearing assets is removed from everybody, day-to-day job.
Great, thanks everybody. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time today. I think we've got time for one more question. And in fact, this question goes back to the metadata question, which was originally raised, and I got some clarification from the original person asking the question. And I think it's probably more related to video than anything else, and the challenges of metadata around video. So here's the question. The question was making a distinction between keywording and tagging versus the capability of accurate and precise object and time-based in-frame metadata tagging. Now, I'm no expert in this area, but my understanding is there isn't really a standard for metadata in the video world. And so over to you guys. Any thoughts, ideas?
Bulent, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can. There is no standard as far as I know also. I have seen some frameworks out there. One of them was Redefine. I remember it's a framework to build other DAM systems potentially, but that has tied metadata into timestamps. And I have worked with systems that can actually create clips of content, which are just markers in and out, and then you can assign metadata to those pieces of the clips. So that type of metadata management can be associated with the assets. And now that we have speech-to-text technology, we have obviously AI, computer vision in place to identify faces and celebrities and those types of things. Some of them can be tied into this time-based metadata, but there should be some industry specification that should come up and say that this is the standard form of tracking metadata against timestamps. This has been done in the broadcast for various things, for kind of many things like closed captions and other time-based metadata has been put into the broadcast signals. So similarly, in the digital world, there should be some standards that we all should try to use, and DAM systems should adapt so that we can start having a better life within the video space.
Yeah, I would agree with what Bulent's saying. I don't work with time-based metadata much, but the two places I've observed it, in the sports video world, they capture tons and tons of metadata real time for things like video playback, in the sports world, and for syndication. Those are, I think, the two big places where that pays off for them. And then in standard like TV production, I've seen kind of the same thing used primarily though for like talent payment, particularly if you have a lot of celebrities on contract coming in and out over time, but also for syndication, particularly when you have, say, talent contracts for some famous actor who shows up in a New York studio for a US-based broadcast, and then in 3 years from now you want to take that over to, say, Southeast Asia. Or do you have the permissions to do that? So those are the two places where I've run into it, and we're just kind of now getting our feet wet in that area. I would add that I don't know, Bulent has more experience than I do. I think there is a lot of activity around this, and there are a lot of people with good experience, but I haven't seen standards really emerge out of that sector yet.
Great, thanks, John. Frederic, from the vendor side, what are your thoughts?
I think that video is really a challenge, and I was here since the last 3 years at the NAB show, which is the best gathering of post-production video in the world. And just for information, I think perhaps that the standard is, even for broadcast, is 4K 60 frames per second. And I will say that 95% of DAM solutions are using the FMMPEG, which is not really the right way as soon as we are talking about terabytes broadcasting video. So reason why today, from what I see in the market, it's really some manual tasks. And so there's a lot of things to do. And perhaps the future of video is, and also metadata, it's more from the software outside of DAM, where you can edit, and at the end of the day, you can also add metadata just like any picture with the Adobe software, something like that. So, but that's true. That's definitely a challenge, because even your smartphone in your pocket is able to shoot 4K videos. So it's not really so obvious to share such a content. Reason why most of brands, just like Warner Bros, or they are just using computers to process file, and then using YouTube channels to share. So a lot of things to do, and but we are still tied to some the latest technology to be able to manage such content.
Well, thank you, Fred. We are basically at the end of our time. I would just like to thank all of the attendees for joining us today, and also to our panelists, Frederic Sanuy, John Florance, and Bulent Dogan. Thank you guys for participating and bringing some great content to this webinar. I'd also like to remind the attendees that please join us at the upcoming Henry Stewart DAM events. So the first is in London on June 28th and 29th, and then in Chicago on September 12th. Apologize to those of you that submitted questions that we weren't able to get to, and thanks again to the panelists and all the attendees. This concludes the webinar today.
Thank you.